The first screams shattered the still air of the Orbital Academy's courtyard. Children of every shape and skin, scaled, furred, feathered, and smooth-skinned, scattered under the looming shadow of the raiders. The black armored mercenaries moved with precision, weapons drawn, their intent clear: seize the children, take hostages, and send a message to the council. But amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. A young Varen, no older than 12 in human years, spread its forearms wide and stood trembling in front of the smallest child in the group, a human girl named Lila. She was 8, her dark hair tangled from the scramble, her wide eyes wet with tears. The Varen, fragile compared to the armored intruders, shook visibly but refused to step aside. The raiders paused, amused. One of them lowered his rifle and laughed, the sound metallic through the helmet's speaker. "Step aside, insect. She's not even your kind." The Varen's mandibles clicked, voice high but firm. "She's under my protection." It was absurd. A hatchling standing before mercenaries trained to kill. But the child didn't flinch, and when the raiders advanced, others followed: the scaled Arillan twins, the feathery Chiv child, even a timid crystalline species that had never stood against anyone in its life. They circled around Lila, trembling but resolute. The leader of the raiding party tilted his helmet, unimpressed. "Fine. Take them all." Blaster fire lit the courtyard. Before the mercenaries could advance further, alarms wailed across the station. Emergency shutters locked down, turrets activated, and a squad of station security stormed the plaza. The mercenaries, realizing their plan had failed, retreated in bursts of suppressive fire and vanished into the void. Lila, unharmed, clutched the hands, claws, wings, and crystalline digits of the children who had shielded her. When the news reached Earth, the reaction was instantaneous and unified. Not from politicians, not from generals, but from humanity itself. The first transmissions weren't threats. They weren't diplomacy. They were promises. The Secretary General of the Terran Accord stood before the cameras, her voice cold as steel. "Today, children not of Earth stood between a human child and death. They chose courage where others would have chosen fear. For that we give this oath: any species who shields our children will never stand alone again. By shielding one of ours, you have declared yourselves family. And family is under Earth's guard." The galaxy didn't know how to react. Humanity was still considered a minor power, loud, reckless, passionate, but not decisive in galactic affairs. Yet suddenly, their fleets mobilized. Not against the raiders. Humanity was not so short-sighted, but to the borders of every species whose children had stood in that circle. The Varens awoke one morning to find Terran destroyers patrolling their trade lanes. The Arillan twins' homeworld discovered Earth Marines walking the streets of their vulnerable colonies, shoulder to shoulder with local defense forces. The Chiv saw Terran supply drops arriving unasked, bolstering their struggling outer settlements. Even the crystalline Geshtari, usually ignored as weak and passive, found themselves escorted by Terran cruisers wherever they traveled. The message was clear. By defending one child, they had bound themselves to Earth. For Lila, the girl at the center of it all, the memory of that day was carved into her bones. She sat now in her quarters aboard the Terran flagship Resolute Dawn, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the holographic news feed. Images of her alien friends standing defiantly against armored raiders looped endlessly, broadcast across every channel. Her guardian, Commander Elias Rourke, stepped into the room. He was a broad man in his 40s, his uniform crisp, his presence commanding. But when he looked at Lila, his expression softened. "You okay, kiddo?" he asked. She nodded slowly. They didn't even know me. Why would they do that?" Rourke crouched beside her, his eyes steady. "Because courage doesn't ask for permission. And because sometimes the smallest voices teach the biggest lessons." Lila's lip trembled. "But now everyone's talking about war." "Not war," Rourke corrected, though his jaw tightened. "Protection. Earth owes them. And Earth pays its debts." The galaxy buzzed with unease. Diplomats whispered about Terran overreach. Rivals fumed at the sudden expansion of human influence. The Council convened emergency sessions, debating whether to censure humanity or to quietly welcome the deterrent effect of their fleets. And in the shadows, the raiders' employers fumed. They hadn't expected a simple hostage grab to trigger a geopolitical storm. Their plan had been simple: strike fear into the Academy, destabilize the younger species, and show that the Council couldn't protect its wards. But humanity had twisted the narrative, turning a failed raid into a declaration of guardianship. Their leader, a warlord named Karishvul, slammed his clawed fist against the Holotable. Humans twist sentiment into weapons. They rallied the weak to their side with words, not strength. If this spreads, they will gather an army of allies we cannot touch. One of his lieutenants growled. Then we silence them. Find the child. Break the shield. Prove their promises mean nothing. Vol's eyes narrowed. No. Killing the child makes her a martyr. We need to show humanity's protection is hollow. Break the species they guard. Burn one of their worlds to ash. Let humanity watch its oath collapse under its own weight. Back aboard the Resolute Dawn, Rourke convened with his staff. The holo map lit with markers: Variant space, Arilland colonies, Chiv stations, Gashtari caravans. They'll strike one of them, Rourke said grimly. Count on it. They'll want to prove we can't be everywhere at once. Captain Nerea Tan folded her arms. So we make them believe we can. Shadow fleets, drone relays, misinformation campaigns. We stretch their perception, not just our lines. Rourke nodded, then glanced toward the sealed side chamber where Lila slept. His voice dropped. They came for her once. They'll come again. And I'll be damned if the galaxy learns Earth can't keep one little girl safe. The hook was already tightening. A child shielded by aliens. A promise made by Earth. And enemies determined to shatter both. The galaxy didn't yet realize it, but humanity's oath had just changed the rules of power. And the first test was already on its way. The Resolute Dawn hung like a steel sentinel in orbit above Vera Prime, its hull reflecting the twin suns. To the people below, the Terran warship wasn't just a vessel, it was a promise. Citizens gathered in plazas to watch the ship eclipse the sky, murmuring in awe. For the first time in their history, they felt something alien to their species: safety. But safety had a price, and not everyone was comfortable with Earth's sudden declaration. Inside the council chamber of Vera Prime, the atmosphere was tense. The chamber's crystalline walls shimmered faintly, refracting light in uneasy colors. Seated at the curved table were the Veran elders, their forearms folded in varying degrees of suspicion. Facing them was Commander Elias Rourke, his uniform immaculate, his presence radiating military calm. Elder Varric, his mandibles twitching, spoke first. Commander, you bring your fleets unbidden, you patrol our skies, and now our traitors whisper that humans have appointed themselves our wardens. Do you mean to make us your vassals? Rourke leaned forward, his voice steady. No, Elder. If humanity wanted vassals, we'd be issuing demands. What we're offering is protection. Your children stood for ours. That makes you family in our eyes. Another elder hissed, skeptical. Family is words. Armies are action. You may protect us today, but what of tomorrow? When your interests waver? When the galaxy shifts? Rourke didn't flinch. Then we'll still be here. Humanity doesn't forget debts. And we don't abandon our own. The chamber fell silent. It was not a politician's promise. It was a soldier's vow, and soldiers did not speak lightly of such things. Far across the stars, Karish Vul's warband plodded in the black void of a derelict station. Holos flickered across the cracked walls, showing Terran ships deploying to various sectors. The mercenaries watched with unease. Vul, his jagged armor glinting under dim light, stabbed a claw toward the map. They scatter their fleets thin. They hope fear of their presence is enough. We will make fear useless. A lieutenant grunted. The Varans are shielded. The Arillans now march with Terran marines. The Chiv have Terran supply convoys. The crystalline ones are under escort. Which do we strike? Vul's lip curled into something between a sneer and a grin. None of them directly. We strike their shadows. Raiders, assassins, sabotage. Break trust. Show that Earth's guardianship is a cage that draws fire, not a shield. The plan was brutal and efficient. On the resolute dawn, Lila woke to the sound of voices carrying through the corridor. She padded barefoot to the door, pressing her ear against the seam. Not sustainable, Elias, Captain Mireya Tan was saying, her tone clipped. We don't have the fleets to patrol half the frontier and keep the core secure. Our enemies know it. Rourke's voice was harder. We don't need to patrol everywhere at once. We just need to make them believe we can. Smoke, mirrors, drone relays. It's enough to buy time until reinforcements arrive. And if they don't? Tan asked bluntly. A pause. Then Rourke's reply, low and iron-willed. Then we bleed before they do. Because the moment humanity lets one of those children fall, the promise we made dies with them. Lila stepped back, heart thudding. She wasn't supposed to hear these things, but she understood enough. This wasn't about her anymore. It was bigger, heavier. Entire species were caught in the tide of something she had unknowingly started. That evening, a delegation of Veyron children arrived on the ship. Among them was Sarah, the one who had first shielded Lila in the academy courtyard. The reunion was awkward at first, two children standing across from each other in a massive hangar, each not knowing what to say. Finally, Lila broke the silence. You saved me. Sarah tilted her head, mandibles clicking nervously. I only stood. Others joined. It was instinct. But you didn't have to, Lila whispered. Sarah's black eyes glimmered. Neither did you humans have to send warships. Yet here they are. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two children caught in the gravity of decisions far larger than themselves. Then, slowly, they smiled. The fragile peace shattered 3 days later. A cargo freighter carrying Arillan colonists to their outer settlement was ambushed. The attackers didn't kill the passengers. Instead, they left them adrift, life support failing, broadcasting one message. Where are your Terran protectors now? By the time Earth's nearest patrol arrived, half the colonists were dead. The rest barely clung to life. The galaxy exploded with speculation. Was humanity overstretched? Were they making promises they couldn't keep? In the war room of the Resolute Dawn, holoscreens displayed the wreck of the freighter. Rourke's face was stone, his fists clenched behind his back. They're testing us, he said quietly. They want to show the galaxy that our word is empty. Captain Tan leaned forward. Then we need to hit back. Hard. Find who did this, and make sure no one doubts Earth's oath again. But Rourke shook his head. No. We don't strike blind. We protect. Always protect. That's how we win this. Not through vengeance, but through proving them wrong, again and again, until no one doubts it. His officers exchanged glances. It wasn't the easy path. It wasn't the quick one. But it was the human way. Late that night, Rourke found Lila in the observation dome, staring at the stars. Commander? She asked softly. Yes, kiddo? Her small voice trembled. What if they keep coming? What if you can't stop them? Rourke knelt beside her, his gaze fixed on the glittering void. Then we keep standing. Even if it costs us. Because the galaxy's watching, Lila. And if they see us falter, every oath, every promise, every shield, shatters. Lila leaned against him, her fear easing just slightly under his certainty. Beyond the glass, the stars looked cold. But for the first time, she believed they might not be so lonely. The predators had made their first move. The question was no longer if Earth would bleed, but how much. And the galaxy held its breath, waiting for the next strike. The wreck of the Arillan freighter lingered in the minds of the galaxy like smoke that refused to clear. News channels replayed the survivors' ragged breaths, their whispered gratitude to the Terrans who had arrived too late. Every broadcast ended with the same haunting question. Where were Earth's guardians? Humanity's enemies smiled at the doubt. Humanity's allies clenched their jaws and prayed the promise still held. And aboard the Resolute Dawn, Commander Elias Rourke plotted how to make sure it did. Pattern analysis, Rourke ordered, pacing the war room. The holomap displayed dots of recent raids, freighters hit, stations sabotaged, outposts harassed. A constellation of pain. Lieutenant Kale, sharp-eyed and wiry, gestured to the glowing red marks. They're not random. Every strike happens at a point just outside our regular patrol cycles. Whoever's leading them knows exactly when we aren't looking. Inside information, Captain Mireya Tan muttered. Which means we've got a leak. Either someone's feeding them intel, or they've cracked our codes. Rourke's jaw tightened. Either way, they're making us look like liars. And I don't break promises. Meanwhile, Lila sat in the Academy's repurposed learning hall aboard the Resolute Dawn. Her classmates were a strange, patchwork family now, Vare and Syrah, the Arillan twins, the shy crystalline Geshtari child. They had been brought together not just for safety, but because the galaxy needed the image of them together, living proof of the oath humanity had sworn. But the children weren't props. They were frightened, restless, and desperate to make sense of the storm swirling around them. Syrah leaned close to Lila, her mandibles clacking softly. They're saying the raiders will come again. That they'll take one of us next time. Lila's small hands curled into fists. Then let them try. Earth won't let them. The Arillan twins exchanged wary glances. One whispered, "What if Earth can't stop them? What if this promise is just words?" The question hung heavy in the air. Even the crystalline child, who rarely spoke, flickered with uneasy light. Lila wanted to scream, to argue, but she didn't. Because deep down, she feared the same thing. The next blow came not with lasers, but with whispers. An encrypted broadcast spread across neutral channels, footage of human soldiers standing guard in Varen markets, patrolling Arillan streets, escorting Geshtari caravans. But the voiceover twisted the images into something darker. Humans call it protection, the broadcast sneered. But what is protection but occupation in softer colors? Today they shield you. Tomorrow they command you. The message spread like wildfire. Allies grew uneasy. Merchants muttered about Terran interference. The Council debated whether Earth was truly honoring its oath, or laying foundations for an empire. In the war room, Rourke slammed a fist against the holotable. They're poisoning the narrative. Turning protection into chains. Captain Tan grimaced. They're winning with words. If we answer with force, we look like tyrants. If we stay silent, the whispers grow. Then we answer with truth, Rourke said. Not speeches. Proof. Proof came sooner than expected. A distress signal screamed across the void, a Geshtari caravan ambushed on the edge of disputed space. Without hesitation, the Resolute Dawn jumped. The battlefield unfolded in chaos, shattered freighters drifting, raider ships circling like vultures. The Geshtari survivors huddled in failing life pods, their crystalline bodies dimming with every passing second. Deploy interceptors! Rourke barked. Form a wall between the pods and those bastards! The Resolute Dawn roared to life. Squadrons of Terran fighters streaked into the fray, missiles tearing into raider hulls. The main cannons unleashed searing light, ripping apart the largest attacker in a single blast. But the raiders fought with desperation. One frigate broke through the defensive net, diving straight for the life pods. Commander, they'll reach the pods in 30 seconds. Rourke didn't hesitate. Bring us about. Put this ship in their path. The helmsman paled. Sir, if they ram. Then we ram first. Move! The Resolute Dawn swung, engines howling. Its massive bulk interposed itself between predator and prey. The raider frigate fired wildly, scoring deep scars across Terran armor. But the Resolute Dawn did not yield. With a thunderous blast, its forward batteries annihilated the frigate in a plume of molten debris. The path to the pods was clear. Cheers erupted on the bridge. But Rourke didn't celebrate. His eyes stayed fixed on the fading life pods. Get them aboard! Now! Hours later, the rescued Geshtari clustered in the hangar, their crystalline forms glowing faintly brighter. Their leader bowed low before Rourke, voice resonant and trembling. You risked your vessel, Your lives for ours. Why? Rourke met his gaze evenly. Because your child stood for ours. That's all the reason we'll ever need. The Geshtari leader's glow brightened, a silent answer more powerful than words. But even victory carried shadows. From a hidden relay, Karish Vul watched the battle's recordings. He snarled, claws scraping the console. They're making martyrs out of every defense. Turning every strike into proof of their oath. One lieutenant spat. Then we killed the girl. Ended at the root. Vul shook his head slowly. No. Kill her, and she becomes a legend. We need something better. We break the human spirit. Force them to choose between their promise and survival. That night, in the quiet of her cabin, Lila dreamed of the courtyard again, the moment when Sarah had stood in front of her. But this time, the dream twisted. Sarah fell. The others fell. And when the mercenaries reached her, there was no one left to shield her. She woke with a scream, tears soaking her pillow. And for the first time, she wondered if even Earth's promise could truly hold. The Resolute Dawn's scars had barely cooled when the next crisis struck. Reports poured in, supply convoys delayed, trade partners withdrawing, entire sectors questioning Terran presence. The propaganda campaign was working. Humanity's oath was beginning to look less like protection and more like a trap that drew fire to every species it touched. In the war room, Rourke stared at the growing storm on the holomap. Each red marker wasn't just a raid, it was a fracture in trust. They're trying to make us the danger, Captain Tan said bitterly. And it's working. Rourke's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. Then we change the battlefield. If they want to fight in the shadows, we drag them into the light. The opportunity came from an unlikely source. One of the rescued Geshtari approached Rourke privately, its crystalline glow faint but steady. We overheard coordinates whispered in the raiders' tongues before you saved us. A gathering place. Not far from disputed space. Rourke studied the trembling being. You're sure? The Geshtari pulsed faintly. We are. But if you go, you will be walking into their nest. Rourke allowed himself a thin smile. Good. That's where I wanted to go. Preparation was swift. A task force of Terran ships assembled, reinforced by volunteers from Varen, Arillan, and even Chiv militias. They weren't strong fleets, but they were symbolic. For the first time, species once considered fragile stood willingly under Earth's banner. Lila watched the departure from the observation deck, Sarah at her side. The hangar thrummed with energy, voices of humans and aliens mingling as soldiers strapped in. Why are they going? Lila whispered. Sarah's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Because they believe your people keep promises. And belief is stronger than fear. Lila hugged her knees, trying to hold on to that thought. The trap was sprung in the black void near the shattered moon of Varath. Rourke's task force dropped out of FTL, and immediately alarms shrieked. Raider fleets materialized from hidden vectors, larger and heavier than intelligence had suggested. Multiple capital signatures! Tan shouted. They knew we were coming! Rourke's gut clenched. Battle stations! Form a shield wall, protect the malicious ships! The void erupted. Terran destroyers unleashed coordinated volleys, tearing into the first wave of raiders. Varen gunships darted through the chaos, nimble but fragile. Arillan frigates clung tight to Terran escorts, firing in short bursts. The Chiv, unused to war, held formation with stubborn resolve. But they were outnumbered. For every raider destroyed, two more emerged. The militia lines buckled. Commander! Tan's voice was raw. We can't hold this line. Rourke's eyes were hard. We don't hold the line. We become the line. Tell every ship, fall back to the Resolute Dawn. We'll be their shield. The command echoed through comms. Slowly, painfully, the malicious ships pulled back, clustering behind the Terran flagship. The Resolute Dawn took the brunt. Plasma fire scarred its hull, shields flared and failed, armor plates buckled. But it held. Every strike against it meant another malicious ship survived. Every second bought was another promise kept. On the bridge of the enemy flagship, Karish Vul watched with growing fury. They bleed themselves dry for weaklings, he snarled. A single ship against a fleet, just to prove words true. His lieutenant hesitated. And yet, the others rally. Look! They fight harder under the Terran's shield. Vol's eyes narrowed. The battle wasn't breaking Earth's, it was cementing it. Unless he shattered it himself. Bring me the child, he growled. The raiders had planned well. Amid the chaos, an infiltration team slipped past the embattled lines, breaching the Resolute Dawn's hangar. Their orders were simple: take Lila alive. Break Earth's promise at its heart. Lila had been ushered to the secure chambers with the other children, but alarms blared before the doors sealed. Armed figures in black armor stormed the corridor. Syrah screamed. The Arillan twins tried to shield her again, claws trembling. But this time, the Terrans weren't far. Marines surged forward, rifles blazing. The corridor became a storm of fire and steel. One raider broke through, seizing Lila's arm. She struggled, terrified, but before he could drag her away, a Marine slammed into him, blade flashing. The raider fell, and Lila was pulled into Terran arms, shielded once again. Stay behind me, kid! The Marine barked, firing into the dark. For Lila, the world narrowed to one truth: strangers, alien or human, were fighting, bleeding, for her. Back on the bridge, Rourke received the report: infiltration attempt repelled, Lila secure. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself a breath. Then his gaze hardened again. Signal the fleet. We don't run. We show them what it means to stand under Earth's guard. The Resolute Dawn's cannons roared, tearing through the enemy flagship's shields. The militia ships, seeing the Terrans refused to yield, surged forward with renewed fury. Together, they turned the tide. When the battle finally ended, the void was littered with burning wreckage. The raiders fled, broken and scattered. Afterward, the militia captains gathered aboard the Resolute Dawn. Some were bruised, some bloodied, all exhausted. But their eyes burned with something new. Elder Varric of the Varans spoke first. You stood for us, Commander. Bled for us. We will not forget. An Arillan captain added, voice fierce. Let the galaxy call it empire or oath. We call it family. The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement. Rourke stood silent for a moment, then spoke. Family is all it ever was. And family doesn't break. But even in victory, shadows remained. Karish Vul had escaped, and his fury would only grow. And Lila, though safe, sat awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Her small voice trembled as she whispered to herself. How many more will bleed for me? The promise was holding, but at a cost that was only beginning to be measured. The council chamber was a cavern of shadows and polished stone, designed to dwarf every species that entered. For centuries it had worked. Envoys bent under the pressure of vaulted ceilings, alien leaders lowered their heads at the weight of history etched into those walls. But not today. Admiral Rowan strode across the chamber floor, his boots echoing with unhurried defiance. The human child stood just behind him, wrapped in a loose gray cloak, her small hand tucked safely in his. Each step he took was a declaration: Earth does not kneel. The chamber was full, hundreds of species packed into tiered seats, murmuring, arguing, recoiling. At the central podium, Councillor Valak of the Drell hissed, his scales rippling crimson with fury. You dare bring the child here? Valak spat, voice booming through the chamber. That creature is the spark of war. Its presence is a provocation. Rowan didn't break stride. He released the child's hand only when he reached the podium. His voice carried, steady as iron. You call her a provocation. I call her proof. The murmurs swelled. The word proof hung in the air. Rowan gestured to the child. She lowered her hood, revealing wide eyes glinting with fear, but not the helpless fear of prey. It was something deeper, a scar etched into her so young it made hardened warriors on the upper benches flinch. This child, Rowan continued, was the only survivor when your raiders descended on her world. Not raiders by accident, but mercenaries sanctioned by your council. She was hidden by a handful of your people, those who chose compassion over obedience. They shielded her with their lives. The child's voice quivered, but she spoke, her words carrying across the chamber. They died so I could run. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of energy fields surrounding the chamber. Rowan leaned forward. His gaze locked on Valax. And for that single act, for the courage of those who stood against the tide, Earth has declared their entire species under our guard. Do you understand what that means? A thunderous pounding filled the chamber, not from voices but from orbit above. Outside the Council's fortress world, human warships had decloaked, their formation deliberate, precise, unmistakable. Not a blockade. Not an attack. A promise. Valax's scales paled. You would gamble the stability of the Council over a single child? Rowan's tone sharpened. Not a gamble. A line. He let the weight of it settle. No rhetoric, no flourish, just a line carved in reality. Another counselor, a frail-winged Sirith, leaned forward nervously. Admiral, you claim guardianship, but such a declaration is dangerous. You risk binding your people to wars not your own. Rowan's lips curved, not in humor but in cold certainty. That is what it means to be human. We don't measure worth in convenience. If one child is worth our fleets, then every world under our guard will know they are not alone. The chamber stirred. Some species whispered hope, others fear. But the idea had been planted, and it was spreading like wildfire through every delegation present. Valax slammed his clawed hand against the podium. Arrogance! You cannot shield them all. Earth is one world. One people. You will break under the weight of your own promise. Rowan straightened, his voice cutting like steel. You misunderstand, Counselor. We don't shield them because we think it will be easy. We shield them because no one else will. That's what terrifies you. The words struck harder than any weapon. Even the child looked up at Rowan with something new in her eyes, relief, maybe even faith. At that moment, the chamber doors burst open. A hologram flickered to life above the assembly, displaying live feeds from the outer defense grid. Human warships were already intercepting raider fleets massing on the fringes of Council space. Impossible! A voice whispered from the benches. They moved before the vote. Rowan didn't even look at the hologram. He knew what it showed. Earth doesn't wait for permission to do the right thing. Valax's composure cracked. You'll drag us all into chaos. No, Rowan said, stepping down from the podium, resting a hand on the child's shoulder. We'll drag you into accountability. The chamber erupted, some in fury, some in awe. The lines had been drawn too clearly to erase. As Rowan guided the child back toward the exit, she tugged at his hand. Admiral, will they be safe now? The ones who helped me? Rowan didn't slow. His eyes stayed fixed on the lights spilling in from the great doors ahead. Under Earth's guard, no harm will touch them again. The doors closed behind them with finality, shutting out the roar of the chamber. Above, the human fleet spread across the stars, a shield of fire and steel that promised something more dangerous than vengeance, protection. Not for conquest. Not for empire. But for the simple, stubborn truth that humanity had decided one act of kindness was worth guarding an entire species. And in that truth, the galaxy shifted. Sparkles, end of story. Loudspeaker, as per your YouTube channel style, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the Void Narratives for more HFY tales.